continues to expand and care moves outside of the four walls of the hospital, systems are increasingly leveraging patient-generated health data, right, or PGHD, and remote monitoring for chronic disease management programs, and it's happening in very impactful ways. Well, Validic will delve into best practices for integrating this data into the clinician workflow and driving actionable health insights and communicating remotely with patients in meaningful ways, all in an effort to prevent negative health events and to improve outcomes and engagement. So we're very excited to have with us Drew Schiller, who is the CEO and co-founder of Validic, and it is a pioneer and leader in providing IT for patient-generated health data for hundreds of in-home clinical devices, wearables, and consumer health applications as well. And within this session, we'll have a little interview with our host, Dale Wiggins, who is the business leader of HealthSuite Digital Platform here. That's the platform that powers our HealthSuite ecosystem of products and services that enable connected health services across the continuum. So we're glad to have them both here, so please welcome them now.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul, and thank you all for joining us, and thanks especially to Drew.
Awesome, glad to be here.
Great. So Drew, with healthcare moving to more value-based care, in the payment models that Paul talked about, what are the benefits of capturing patient-generated data?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the benefits are, traditionally we live in a world where patient care is managed by episode, right? And so there's a concept of episodic care. With patient-generated data, we actually, in our data system, we don't have the concept of episodes, right? Or encounters. We have continuous data. We have all of the data that's happening in the day-to-day lives of patients. And what's really important here is that so much of information that is collected that could be relevant for healthcare is actually happening day-to-day outside the four walls. And so when you think about how that can be applicable in a world that's moving toward a value-based model as opposed to fee-for-service, is you can increase panel size, right? So for example, right now we live in a world where many physicians have a 2,500 to 1 patient-to-physician ratio, which is already something that is very high. And that's something that, regardless of the reimbursement model, we're already going to see that increasing. So over the next few years, I've talked with several health system leaders who are expecting a 3,500 to 1 or even a 5,000 to 1 patient-to-physician ratio. And data is really a way, patient-generated data specifically, is really a way that you can help manage that patient population so that you can actually be more proactive and understand, hey, this is somebody who is doing well with their treatment protocol and regimen, as opposed to this is somebody who is actually not somebody we need to reach out to today, right? Or somebody we actually do need to reach out to today, excuse me. Yeah. So those are the real opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer, Drew, and I think that's certainly something we're experiencing within Philips with a lot of the solutions that we represent here, and it's a lot of the reason behind HealthSuite is to really enable that continuum, because so often, whether we're experiencing healthcare, we get that momentary glimpse of the data when you're seeing the physician, but then ultimately what happens to you when you're in the home. And I think that's really what it's all about, and I think that's what's going to make the difference.
Absolutely, yeah.
Great,
yeah.
Great. All right, so next question. So you guys have a lot of experience with that. It's one of the reasons why we work with you is you guys have been doing this for years, and you're really great at it. What are the challenges associated with integrating that patient data into the actual clinical workflow?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a really important question. So Validic today, we connect with over 400 health apps, wearables, and in-home medical devices outside the four walls. And our job is really to make that data capture seamless. But the important thing is, how is that data actually relevant and useful inside the clinical context? That's actually one of the reasons why we're so excited with the HealthSuite partnership, right? So the important thing is to be able to bring that data to the clinicians in a way that's actionable. And I oftentimes get the question around, hey, look, and this is why we talked about, the shift from I don't need your Fitbit data to please can I have some more. I used to hear this all the time is I don't need massive volumes of data. There's no way I can process this. And when I hear people say to me, what do I do with all of this data? I say, well, look, if you feel like you're inundated with too much patient-generated data, you're doing it wrong, right? What you should be receiving is actionable data, you should be receiving insights that enable you to take action. So you should be able to, as a clinician, understand this is something I need to do based on the data, as opposed to this is data I need to sit there and analyze. And so it's really important to deliver it in the clinician's workflow in a way that's actionable, manageable, and really easy just to use, as opposed to something that you need to actually spend time deciphering.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Joe. I spent a lot of time with Philips Research, and in working with the clinicians, a lot of times we come up with these great algorithms that analyze the data, and we talk about, okay, this algorithm has this great sensitivity. Wouldn't this be great to use? And so oftentimes what we hear from clinicians is, yeah, but how am I actually going to use that? And I think that's really what you're talking about. That's right. That the data needs to be actionable. You need to basically take that thing, and it's got to cause something new to be different with the patient. It needs to be a new insight that the clinician can actually respond to.
That's right. And what's interesting about that insight is that oftentimes it's not even the actual data that provides the insight. So, for example, sometimes it's the lack of the data. So an insight could be, hey, this patient actually hasn't taken a blood pressure reading or a glucose reading in the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something we should reach out about, right?
Yeah.
So there are actions to be taken, or there's information that could be there that's outside of even just taking an action on a specific a piece of data. It could be a trend over time. There's a concerning trend over time around the way that this blood pressure is trending.
I think that is so important, because my heart rate, at any one point in time, it's all contextual and relative to what is normal.
That's right.
I'm sure it's very different than yours, and very different than most people in the audience. And I think that's ultimately what you need to bring.
That's right. Yeah, context is everything.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, good. So what recommendations would you give to healthcare institutions, providers, et cetera, that are looking to, whether it's integrate a new mobile app, a new device, what recommendations would you give them?
Yeah, so the first thing that I would recommend is you need to have this in a program of care. So it's one thing to just bring device data in, but it's also important internally within the health system to have a structure and a program around bringing that patient in. So one of the amazing things about patient-generated data is we have an opportunity to engage patients in new ways. So, many of these apps and devices are created by consumer health companies who create engagement. They exist solely because of their ability to actually engage the patient or engage the consumer. And this is something that healthcare organizations can actually leverage. But without a program of care, and what I mean by that is a way to a construct within the health system to understand, for a specific disease state, how are we going to manage this patient population? How are the nurses and the care coordinators and if it's a program like a type 2 diabetes program, the diabetic nutritionists, let alone the endocrinologists, how are we going to actually manage the data and the patient workflow? That's really important. I think that's often a missed opportunity when integrating this data.
Yeah, I agree. I think that whole notion of program is so important that, without that, and to me, it includes the metrics, doesn't it, in terms of
That's right.
Not only collecting the data, but actually following the results and seeing, how you're going to ultimately tune that program based upon, the way that the patient's responding and the overall system's responding.
That's right. And for the patient too, it's important for them that they feel like they're a part of this program, right? It's not just you're not putting them on a device and sending them on their way. There's actually, whether it's through an app that is built by the health system, whether it's through a great platform like HealthSuite, there's something that they can actually engage with as part of this program and be working toward a goal that's meaningful for them.
Yeah, you say patient, and I think that's really what it's all about. So speaking of patient, so last question, how do we get more effective at really getting patients to engage in their own healthcare and actually, want to integrate their data into their overall care process?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a really important question. So a really quick story. So Validic right now, we are working with the Office of the National Coordinator, the ONC, and Accenture Federal Services to do a demonstration pilot to demonstrate how patient-generated data can be useful in the clinical workflow. We're working with Sutter Health on this, specifically around type 2 diabetes management. So we're connecting glucose meters, weight scales, and activity trackers into the Sutter workflow. This is actually being raised up in the Epic instance, in the Epic EHR, where a care coordinator can look every day at sort of a dashboard of what's going on. And they can understand who they should reach out to, which patients are doing well versus which patients aren't. And the important thing about this is that the patients who are in this program, you talk about how do we get them engaged. Patients absolutely, in our research around this, patients absolutely want to be engaged with their data, or to be engaged with the program, but they want to know that their data is actually useful. And so I'll give you an example. So one of the gentlemen that we've spoken to who's in this program, he's in his 50s. He said, look, every single person in my family who has ever turned 40 has developed type 2 diabetes. My father, my brother, my sister, my grandma. I turned 40, I got type 2 diabetes. Like, I'm not lazy, I exercise every day, I eat healthy. I also track my glucose regularly. I track it 5 to 7 times a day. Before I was in this program, what I would do is I would take my glucose readings, and it would be stuck in my glucose meter app. And so what I would do is once a month, I would export a PDF, I'd fax it to my endocrinologist, who would, look at it and I don't know what to do with this. Yeah. So nothing would happen, right? And because of this, he's always had problems managing his medication and managing his A1C. So he got into this program. This is already somebody who's trying to be engaged, right? He wants to be engaged, but it's so hard for him. So he got into this program, and he said, first and foremost, it's so nice to know that my data is actually just going to the doctor. Yeah. I know that somebody's looking at it. And second, he said about 2 weeks into the program, the diabetic nutritionist called him and said, "Hey, look, things are looking good. Your diet is looking good. Like we love that you're logging it. Your glucose values, we love that you're tracking those regularly. You're exercising well. But what I'd like to know is what's going on some days between 7 and 9 p.m. because your glucose is actually spiking between those periods, but you're not logging any other information." He said, "Well, I don't know." And so they talked about it, and it turns out, he said, I'm a snacker. So his kids are in college, but they live at home, and at night they're sitting there, they're watching TV, they're watching sports, there's chips, there's popcorn, whatever. He's taking a handful of popcorn and just kind of munching on it, and that was enough to spike his glucose. And so through that interaction, he actually cut out the snacking, and within 30 days, his A1C dropped by 0.5 point.
Wow.
And so that's the type of thing where this is a patient who has tried to be engaged, he wants to be, but it's a very simple, all we did was actually just make the data available for the clinicians to actually make a diagnosis or a treatment protocol, treatment recommendation for him, and it worked. So that's the kind of thing that I think that when, in our research, physicians and patients are well aligned, they definitely want to improve their health. And so we just need to give them a simple mechanism for getting the data to the right place in order to do that.
Yeah, it's a great story, Drew, but I'd also take some more, I question if there are a few other lessons out of that.
Yeah.
So one thing, in the past, he was getting the data, he was acquiring the data, but it wasn't
going anywhere. That's right.
So I think it's that integration thing, but then also the results. I mean, we all respond to results, and if you keep pounding your head against the wall, at the end of the day, if there's no response to that,
That's right. The coolest thing was he said, you know what, in this interaction, he said, so my A1C dropped by 0.5 point, and he's now sitting at 7.5, and he has a lifetime goal of getting it down to 6, right? And that's something that he actually sees now, that's actually potentially achievable because for the first time in 15 years of being a diabetic, he's actually seen his A1C drop.
Wow. Very cool. Very cool. So maybe another thought. How, one of the things that I really value about working with Validic is the breadth of devices and how quick you are in terms of being able to pull in, the latest and greatest device. And it's certainly something that I value, just in my own life is, I want the latest and greatest and I want to use something. Is that an important part of engagement as well, is giving the patient choices in terms of how they're going to interact?
Absolutely. So one thing that we found is that there's a wide variety of patients, right? So we really have to meet patients where they are. And for some patients, they're always going to want to be on the latest and greatest. They're always going to they're going to be on the bleeding edge. They always want to download the next new thing. And then for other patients, they want to use what they're comfortable with. They want to use something that they've used for the last 10 years. And that's actually a big challenge for us because reliable Bluetooth protocols weren't even around 10 years ago, right? Yep. And so that's something we think about a lot at Validic. And in fact, for those patients who are more of the lagging adopters, maybe they bought a glucose meter, a blood pressure monitor from a retail pharmacy, 10 years ago. We actually needed to be able to get that data to make it actionable. So we developed some technology where it's called VitalSnap, where just like you can scan a credit card and read the numbers off your credit card and turn that into data on your phone, we can actually do that with the non-connected legacy glucose meters, blood pressure monitors, pulse oximeters. So you just hold the camera over your glucose meter, turns that into a digital asset, and then delivers that data up into the healthcare system in an immediate, actionable way. So yeah, meeting the patient where they are is absolutely critical. I think the key word is frictionless. Like, how can we make this experience for the patient frictionless and not add additional burden in order to get improved care?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up VitalSnap. Didn't you introduced that here last year?
That's right.
Yeah, I remember that. Right. And that has, every customer that I talk to just loves that app because, the reality is a lot of people are using those legacy devices and, no one wants to throw it away, and it's a really great solution.
Yeah.
All right, Drew, that's all my questions. I want to,
Awesome.
It's been my pleasure being here with you and exchanging these questions and thoughts, and maybe turn it back to Paul and see if there's any questions from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both, gentlemen. Oh, I got to turn my mic on. All right, yeah, thank you both for being here. Thanks so much, Drew. Do we have any questions from the audience before we wrap things up here? Any more information you'd like to ask Drew about, or? Oh, here's one. Hang on just one sec. Would you mind talking right into that for us so we can hear it on the camera, too?
Sure. Hi, Drew. What is the major target population that you're approaching with your technology?
Yeah, so
Thank you.
Validic, we connect with over 400 devices, and these are, span. So there's no real target population for Validic, but there are target populations that many of our customers work with. So, it's everything from remote patient monitoring capabilities around hypertension or diabetes, especially that comorbidic population, especially with around hypertension and COPD or type 2 diabetes and hypertension, as well as we've also done a lot of work with folks around readmissions. So that's a big one because there's immediate ROI, right? If we can keep a patient from being readmitted, maybe from post-heart failure, that's a real opportunity. And so one quick example there, we have a partner we work with called I Get Better that does readmissions work. And what they've seen is that they were able to, with a pilot with Brockton Health System, they were able to, with a 30-patient pilot, realize 0 readmissions when Brockton would normally expect 8 of those patients to be readmitted. That was an immediate $216,000 savings to that, and all they did was deploy connected weight scale and blood pressure monitor to that population. Yeah, but the readmissions piece is really important. Those are just some examples, and in terms of other use cases, so we see a lot of, on the payer side, there's a lot of sort of preventive wellness opportunities, to keep people healthy. So that's where a lot of the wearable data comes in. That's very handy. We've also seen a lot of movement in the life sciences space, specifically around clinical trials, as well as with apps that pair with drugs in order to keep people healthy and engaged in their regimen.
Yeah, maybe just to add a piece onto that, because Drew, I thought your earlier answer about how to engage in the clinical workflows around programs, and to me that's the key thing. Yeah. Is you identify what program, what problem you're trying to fix, and the target population or the target geographic is based upon that program. And it's, and I think that's the advantage of having the breadth of devices. We're pretty unlimited in terms of the number of programs that we can ultimately address.
Great question. All right, any other questions? All right. Well, once again, let's have a round of applause for Drew. Thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. And thank you, Dale, for hosting this. We're glad you all were here, too.
Thanks,
I know
sir.
it's the end of the show week. It was a great crowd to finish things up. Thanks, guys. And if you'd like to join the discussion, you might have time for a question afterwards before they go. Otherwise, you can tweet at Philips Live From with the hashtag HIM17 to tell us what you thought or to ask any questions there. We really appreciate it, everybody. We've had a fantastic week here at HIMS, and we hope to see you next year. Thanks, everybody.